Hey guys, it's Bart here. So in this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive into how to get AI ticket classification for Zendesk using Voiceflow as our AI tool, so the backend tool that's going to take the ticket from Zendesk, process it, and then send it back to Zendesk. I'm going to show you exactly how you can just get started today, like within the next hour, how you can deploy something for your own team. If you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe. I do a bunch of Zendesk stuff. And if you like what I do and you want to work with me, just reach out. I work with different businesses for automating their workflows. All right, let's get into the video. So let's figure out how this process is going to look. This is really good practice. Go onto a Miro board, go onto some kind of whiteboard, even draw it out by hand using a pencil, and draw out the exact flow that you want. So over here, let's say we have a customer and they've sent us an email and it comes into Zendesk as a new ticket. So Zendesk, and it comes in as a new ticket. Every conversation that comes into Zendesk, so every new ticket that comes in, you tag it with the intent of that ticket. So was it a customer looking for tracking information? Was a customer looking for general product information? Which product was it about? So at the end of the week, you can look at your last week of tickets and say, okay, out of 100% of our volume, 50% were about troubleshooting. And now you have a really solid starting point for what kind of work we're going to do this next week. Let's figure out troubleshooting and reduce our tickets and therefore reduce our support costs. We're going to be getting every new ticket that comes in and we're going to be sending it to Voiceflow. Now we're sending it to Voiceflow so we can actually process the ticket using AI, and we're going to classify the intent of the ticket. You can just imagine that you have an additional agent and all they're doing is reading the ticket and then setting these tags. Oh, it's a general question. Oh, it's a refund. And depending on your team structure and who's responsible for what, maybe general questions go to the general team, refunds go to the refund team. Maybe if we identify that the ticket is from an angry customer, maybe you change the priority of the ticket as well, and then you escalate the ticket as well. So the intent classification itself is super useful because you can pick up issues really quickly. If you have a SaaS business, like a software as a service business, and you want to stop churn, then you can build a profile of tickets that are associated with a high probability of churn. For example, just signed up, having an issue with setting up their account. Most commonly, 30% of these tickets will result in end of subscription. So you can use AI to immediately identify those tickets, send them to a priority queue, or send them a certain reply or whatever, all based off the intent of the ticket. So a lot of your workflows in Zendesk will also be based off intent. So anyway, I'm gonna stop talking about that now because I think you guys get the point. So we send it to Voiceflow, and then we use AI to classify the purpose of contact. And then all we're gonna keep things super simple here. We're gonna send this back to Zendesk. And within Zendesk, we're gonna apply some tags. So in Voiceflow, we're gonna decide which category it is, and we're gonna apply the appropriate tags into Zendesk. And then once it's in Zendesk, you can do absolutely anything you want here. You don't have to use AI. You can go and build out some triggers that say, every time a new ticket comes in and it has this tag on it, do this or this or this. So the trigger part, you're gonna do by yourself. I'm not gonna do any of that with you right now. All we're gonna do is build out this basic system. So now that we have an understanding of visually what we need to do, we need to send the info from Zendesk to Voiceflow. That's something we need to do here. That's the first step. Technically here, there's nothing to do. It's just sending it to Voiceflow. This is like a intermediate step. But then we need to use AI to classify the ticket. So somehow we need to get the ticket info here in Voiceflow, and then we need to process the ticket info. And then after we process the ticket info and maybe create our own tags, sending it back to Zendesk, we need to then use an API call to update the ticket. There's a few key steps that we need to do here. Again, running through, we need to somehow get that ticket and send it across to Voiceflow. Once it's in Voiceflow, we need to get the ticket information so we actually know what the request is. And then we can plug that into an AI step to process the info and decide on what's the actual intent of the ticket. And then we can get an API call from Voiceflow and directly update the ticket in Zendesk. So let's jump across to Voiceflow and start building this out. Okay, so to chunk this down, all I'm gonna do right now is just focus on the Voiceflow side of things. I'm just gonna focus on, as if I already have the ticket in Voiceflow, then I'm gonna process it, and then I'm gonna send it back to Zendesk. So this part I'll do at the very end, and this part I'm gonna do right now. So the first thing that I wanna do is make an API call to Zendesk. And this API call is gonna get me some ticket information. So I'm gonna get ticket info. Now, if you're building this out for something like Freshdesk or Gorgeous, then you just need to go to the appropriate API docs. But this is how you would find it for Zendesk. So Zendesk, what are we doing here? API info, and we're gonna go to tickets. Here are all the API requests that you can make on the left-hand side. Tickets, attachments, ticket comments. It's pretty self-explanatory. So we just need to go to show ticket, and the show ticket API endpoint is going to return a number of ticket properties, though it's not going to give us the ticket comments. So this will give us the ticket subject and the first comment on that ticket. So when you submit a new ticket to Zendesk, those are the two placeholder things that you always need for a new ticket. So the subject as well as the very first comment, and that is going to be shown in this endpoint. If you want to do classification of the ticket each time it's updated in Zendesk, so each time a customer responds and you want to reclassify, which I don't recommend you do. But if you did, then you would use the list comments endpoint, and that will give you all the comments on the ticket. So anyway, we're going to be using this endpoint here. It's going to be a GET request. We're going to get this from Zendesk, and here is the specific endpoint. Note that we need the ticket ID. So let's go to Node.js, and this is how we're going to structure our call. This is what we're going to essentially build out into this API request here. So we already have it as GET. Now I'm going to copy this here and paste it into our GET. Where it says example, we're going to get our domain from Zendesk. So it's going to have your domain.zendesk.com. So just get that your domain part. You couldn't see mine, but this is my one. And we have / API v2 tickets and then the ticket ID. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create a variable for our ticket ID. And let's call this ticket ID. And let's add that as a variable. Essentially what we're doing here is just making this endpoint dynamic. So now every time we get a new ticket from Zendesk following this process, any ticket that comes in, we're just going to isolate the actual ticket ID, and then we're going to be able to run the exact same flow on every single ticket because the ticket ID is unique. Now, as you can see already, the value of us doing the Voiceflow build means that now we know what info we need to send to Voiceflow. Before we would have been like, shit, what are we sending? We don't know. But now that we're already building out the Voiceflow part, we can kind of reverse engineer and see we need a ticket ID primarily, and that's maybe all we need. So back in Voiceflow, let's keep moving forward with this. So, okay, let's go back into the API docs here. We have content type. Let's paste that into this first header. Copy that across as well. Next header for authorization. Okay, and then we need to, we just copy across this as well, and I'll come back and I'll explain this. Paste it into here. That's just a template for how we'll build it out. Okay, so basic and then auth value, and we need a base 64 encode our credentials here. Okay, so base 64 is a type of encoding that you do. You cannot just put your username and password like this and then paste it in. You've got to encode this. But we're going to be using API auth. We're going to be using Zendesk API authentication. So here is the actual format that we need to encode. So we're going to plug this into a base 64 encoder. So let's go base 64 encoder, base 64 encoder, paste that format into here. And then now I'm going to use my Zendesk email address. So most likely if you're an admin of your Zendesk account, use that email address because you'll also make the API on your account, the API token. So I'm going to go Bart at unchpad.com. Okay, now back in Zendesk, let's go to Admin Center. Type in API, Zendesk API. Okay, I got some random APIs already open, but don't use this convention. I was just running a test with this. I just put the API as the actual name of the token. Do not do that. Yeah, okay, make sure that you have this enabled. If this is disabled, you won't be able to use this API token to authorize your API call. But we have our new API token here. We're just going to call this API token. Call it whatever you want. This is my demo, so this is not going to be super descriptive, but make it descriptive. I'm going to copy, I'm going to save, and I'm going to plug this into here. So I'm getting rid of the squiggly brackets. I'm pasting it right there. Shit, did I do it right? Yeah, I did it right. Let's go encode, and now copy this value. Let's go back into Voiceflow, and we're pasting it in between these half triangle thing. I don't even know what they're called, but that's where we're pasting it. Okay, back in the API docs, that's pretty much all we need. Okay, we have our GET request, the URL, content type, and authorization. So at this stage, let's test this out. I'm gonna go back into Zendesk and just find this ticket. So we got ticket ID 80. Let's see what we return here. So send request, ticket ID 80, and let's see what happens. If we set it up correctly, then we'll get some information back. Okay, cool. So we did get some information back. We had the ticket ID 80. The channel was API because I would have created it via API, but you'd see email there, you might see a web form there, whatever channel it comes in. And you get a bunch of other ticket information. So the subject and the description, which is 1. So this is a pretty bad example because this is the original comment on that Zendesk ticket when it was submitted, and this is the ticket subject. But aside from that, we have what status it is, what priority it is. So you can see we can set pretty much everything that you see here, we can set that. So we can add things into here. But the main thing that we want to do now is, let's think about this. Okay, we have the API call that's going to get all the information we need for the Zendesk ticket. And we really only need the subject, and we really only need that first comment because we're just looking at brand new tickets. So that's all we want to save from this API call. We want to access the subject, which is this, and the description, which is this, number 1. When you're making an API call in Voiceflow, to access the actual response, you always use response dot something. Think of it like a filing cabinet. This entire thing is saved in the original file, which is called response. So you have to write down response, and then that's the response folder. Now we're opening it. So we're going to go boom into this folder. Then we're going to open up this ticket folder. Then we're going to go all the way down here to the subject, and we're going to go ticket response.ticket.subject and response.ticket.description, and that's going to give us this value. It's going to output these things. So let's go to capture response, and let's go response.ticket.subject, and let's save this to a new variable called ticket subject. Wowza, let's put a capital S there. Create, whoops, don't want to do that right now. And let's make another one called response.ticket.description, and let's save this to ticket description. Okay, let's make the exact same request. Let's generate this. Okay, the first thing we need to do now, and I want to test this out to make sure that we're saving the variables. So the first thing I'm going to do is just capture, I'll just write it here for a nice visual how this looks. What is your ticket ID? And then let's use a capture step here and capture this to ticket ID. And yeah, that's all we need. And let's plug it into here. Let's run this, and we're going to open up this little side panel, and that's going to give us all the variables that we have running in this current environment. So as you can see, ticket description, ticket ID, ticket subject. So we've been prompted for our ticket ID. Let's go 80. Let's hit send, and now we have ticket ID has been populated. And look at that, we have our new chat ticket, which is ticket subject, and that's this thing here. And then we have the description, which is 1. And we have that description, which is here, 1. So, okay, now we can see that we have the flow of obtaining the information. This is arguably the hardest bit to get right. So we know that we're gonna have to somehow send some information from Zendesk into Voiceflow, and we have to first capture that ticket ID. And then using the ticket ID, we're gonna make an API call that's gonna open up the entire ticket for us. So from here, the next step is we're gonna use an AI step. We're gonna go set AI. So we're going to save a certain variable that contains the category of our ticket. Let's just call this AI intent. The variables that we're going to be putting here are, let's go very basic. I'm not going to do any crazy prompting here. I'm just going to make it this very basic. So I'm going to go ticket subject and then ticket description. And I'm going to apply this to, let's say, AI intent. Now for my prompt settings, I'm going to bring my temperature down because it's not super important to be very high, and maybe keep it, keep us about midway for our max tokens. And let's just think what we want to do here. We essentially want to get the ticket subject and ticket description. We want to read it, and then we want to apply a certain value into this AI intent that lets us distinguish what the actual contact reason is. So let's just start off by saying you are an AI customer support assistant, and your main job is to categorize the intent of tickets. Now there's two ways that you can do this. You can actually do this without getting too complex into this. You can either just make this output a number, which is what I typically do for like when I'm first starting off making intent classifiers for people. I just start super simple. I predefine what each number means. Output 1 if it's a general question, output 2 if it's a return, output 3 if it's a complaint, output 4 if it's spam, output 5 for whatever. And that's a really easy way that you can just start testing the system out and making sure that everything fits together. A more advanced way is to use JSON output. It's typically like this, of key value pairs. So you might have the high-level bucket of contact, could be general question, warranty, product support, and then each of these might have a bit more of a detailed sub-tag. For example, primary category tag. There we go. And then you would have whatever you have here. X is your main output. And then you might have secondary underscore tag or category. And you might have Y, for example. And then you just close this off to show you how you can actually get more value from this one AI call. And you would say, you are to classify the intent of the customer support ticket against the following categories. Primary category, you might be general question, might be product support, and then returns and refunds. And then here you'd say secondary category for general question. And then you would build out the secondary categories for this, which might be what product is it? And you obviously you'd build it out a little bit more from here. Maybe what region is it? And then secondary category for product support. Anyway, so then the AI would essentially read the ticket and see, okay, this is a general question. So then it would output general question like this. And then it would see my secondary categories are, product. So you might have product and then choose one of these, product A, product B, and you can get really nuanced here, which region, and maybe you have a way of telling the region, I don't know. And then this is going to basically pick up and say, oh, it's about a product A as well. So secondary category is this product. But the basic process that we're going to be doing is just following this simple process. Output 1 if the ticket is about a general question. Output 2 if the ticket is about a product issue. And output 3 if the ticket is about a return. Then output 4 for anything else. So we're going to catch everything. Now, this is a really good way to kind of take the process step by step and just refine your actual approach, because from here you can start building this out. You might have more numbers, like you might go up to 10, or you might realize that you have a more complex ticketing system and you use that JSON format that I explained before. And then from here, let's just make it super clear. Output instructions and end instructions. Your output will only be the number without any additional words or phrases. Okay, let's just see how this works. So we're going to import ticket subject and ticket value. Hi, how long is the measuring tape? Let's generate and see what we get as the output. Okay, 1, it's a general question. Let's try it again. Preview, hi, my item is broken and I need to return it. 3, okay, so if the ticket is about a return, and let's go one more time and just say something completely random. Hi, my name is Bart. Let's see what it does with this. 4, okay, for anything else. So that's totally unrelated. So all we're going to do now is we have to take this AI intent. We have the output here, which is 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we're going to use a condition step. So we're just going to filter out and say take path 1 if it's about 1, path 2 if it's about 2, and then that's how we're going to tear down this AI intent and capture is it 1, 2, 3, or 4. So now we're just going to take different paths and update the Zendesk ticket routing. Now, okay, the value of also doing this routing is that if you do want to take control of some more of these steps, so in Zendesk I said, all right, if you add a tag to here, you can get a Zendesk trigger and get it to fire off. If it's a refund, assign it to this person. We can take control of more of that within Voiceflow. So we can actually do a bit of that routing here, maybe make some of those API calls here. Let's say one of your intents was someone is asking for tracking information. Then one of these routes might just go right into Shopify API call, receive that tracking information directly within this one flow. And then as we return it back into Zendesk, our update into Zendesk also has a separate section here, like a field that says Shopify tracking. And then we just paste it directly into here. So when the agent comes in, they don't have to look anywhere else. They just have the tracking number here. Or if you want to go next level mode, you can just automatically reply with the tracking information. So again, there's a lot that you could do here. I'm trying to keep things super simple to give you a good starting point. But let's start routing this. So if the variable AI intent has the value of 1, we go this direction. Let's enter that. Okay, let's add a new condition. Maybe we can just duplicate this. Okay, so now if it's 2, we're going in this direction. I'm not going to use this 3. I'm just going to keep duplicating these. If it's 3, go in this direction. And let's have a 4 as well. The 4 is going to be really not useful for us right now because we're not going to do anything with that. But let's call this, if it's a general question, so we have general question, we had product issue, here is return, and then here is no match. Okay, so from here, we're going to start making an API call so we can update our Zendesk ticket. So there's a few ways that we can do this. Going back into here, when we update our Zendesk ticket, we can either directly update these forms and fields. So if this is unselected, like all these things will be empty when the ticket is first sent, we can automatically set this, whatever we want straight from the Voiceflow API call. But I'm going to keep this super easy. I'm just going to add a tag into here, and that tag is going to be general question. And then you can use this general question tag and build out a trigger that says every time you see a ticket that has this tag submitted on it, complete this step. So in the Zendesk documentation, we want to add a tag to the ticket. So we're going to be using this endpoint, which is pretty similar to what we had before. We actually had this before, and we had a get request to get the information. Now we're going to be putting information into the ticket, and we're going to append /tags. Now, just to show you, in the actual tickets endpoint, there is a update ticket endpoint, which is just this, which is the exact same URL we had before. Instead of get, we're going to use put. We don't want to use this to update the tag on a ticket, because if we use this endpoint, whatever tags we had on the ticket already will be completely erased, and we'll add new tags only. Don't use the endpoint that has just ticket ID. We want to use the tags endpoint, which is this. Okay, so now that we know this is the endpoint, let's go back into Voiceflow, and let's just do a bit of a hack job here, right? We already have this API call. So let's get that, let's duplicate it, let's bring it here, and let's close off this process. And here we're going to be doing put, and here we're going to be doing /tags. Let's test this out. Okay, so we need to add tags to our ticket. So we need to do body parameters. So back in the API call, we have curl. We don't need to use curl. We're using Node.js. So we already have the actual API call configured. We're using put. We have the endpoint. We have the ticket ID that we're targeting. We have a content type. The same authorization works. And now the body, which is what we need, is here. Okay, this is the body that we can use. So let's just copy this. Was it listed here? Or I just not see it? Yeah, okay, no, I'm not crazy. Let's go back into Voiceflow. And let's go to role, and let's put this here. And let's just change customer to example. Let me just refresh this ticket. Yep, reload, we don't really care. We want to remove whatever I just added here. Wicked, that's done. So now let's send request and just see if this is working. We put the ticket ID 80 in, and now we added example. Okay, the status call was successful, right? And we got returned that we now added example because we didn't have it before. We only had 2. We had these 2, and that was added just now to why it's in blue. And if you want to look at the ticket events and just see that, what was done to this ticket, all the way down, less than a minute ago, we just added tags from our main account. Again, we used our email address and the API token was generated from the main account. That's why it's going to show as if you updated the ticket. You can change this kind of stuff by adding more variables into the body. So like you can actually make it say submitted by a certain user, and then you just put the user ID into here. You can just do all that kind of stuff. But again, we're just keeping it super simple. We're going to add the tag right now, and let's just call this general question. And we have our intent classification here. To give you a bit of a demo about what else you could do, and I know we're just doing intent classification here, but like, okay, maybe if you wanted to generate a response as well to this ticket, you would have another set AI step set AI step. And here you would just generate, okay, the same input. So ticket subject and ticket description, and you might save it to like AI response, create variable, and then the prompt would be, again, let's just bring this down a little bit. Let's bring this up and say, generate a response for this question. And we want to format your reply as if it is an email reply. Okay, you get the idea. And then from here, you would just go knowledge base, and then you would just upload your own knowledge base into this specific build, and you'd be able to generate a question. And if you wanted to update the actual ticket as well, we saw before from our API documentation, we can use the exact same endpoint that we used to get the ticket data. We can just put ticket data into here. So we go with this. Again, we have to have 2 of these so we can actually add new tags to the ticket and not erase them. Because if we added this raw body, if we just added this into here, into this raw body, it would erase all the other tags, which is not what we want. And then from here, okay, Bart, how do you structure this response? Let's go back to here and find update ticket. And here's a sample body of how to update the ticket. So let's just copy all this and go into here. And we have, okay, ticket comment, the body is thanks for choosing Acme Motors. But what we would do is just insert AI, is it response? Is it here? It should be here. Public is true. Okay, so if we want a message to the customer, we leave this as true. If we just want to send an internal note so no one sees this, like just the agent can see this but not the customer, we send this as false. And then we can do custom status ID, which this is where you're getting into like changing those status fields in your ticket. We don't care about that. Let's just leave that and status is solved. Or we can either solve the ticket, we can leave it as open, we can set it to pending, or we don't have to change anything on this and we just leave it as it is. What did I erase here? Okay, I don't know if this should be here or not, but we'll make the call soon and we'll see if it's correct or not. So okay, we got ticket, comment, and we're gonna be adding something here. So let's go send request. We have ticket 80. Let's put a sample response and say testing response. So this is gonna be essentially the placeholder for the AI response that we would have generated. Let's send this. Okay, there's an error here, which I think is this comma shouldn't be there. Yep, no, worked. Okay, status 200, all good. Let's go back to the Zendesk ticket and see what we added. Okay, testing response. So let's get out of this events view and go to general view. So here you would have had the actual response. So let's say I was an agent, I would have come into here saying, okay, this is general question. Here's a randomly generated response that I could have applied to this ticket. And as an agent, I might even just copy and paste this, right? And then hit send straight away and then solve this or whatever I want to do. So that's how you can actually make more, squeeze more juice out of this process. But for now, since we're doing intent classification, you would just plug it directly into here. And then from here, you just build out your other processes, right? So here you would make the exact same API call. So you would just duplicate this. And then you would change your tag to whatever you want to change it to. So let's say, what is this? Product issue. And you're always going to use underscores. You're never going to put like blank spaces because Zendesk doesn't like blank spaces for tags. It's either always one string of like letters or there's an underscore when you're using tags. And this is how you build everything out. Okay, so let's go back to Miro. So we have all this stuff done. All this stuff is done. I'm just going to go green because I like to look back and just see all the hard work that we've done here. So boom, 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 right? It's all green. It's all done. The only thing that's remaining is this very first block. Why isn't this going? Hey guys, while we're here, I want to do a quick shout out to myself. I use Voiceflow for my own customer support workflow automation, and I created a plugin that lives in a Zendesk ticket sidebar and a ticket editor, and it lets you plug in Voiceflow agents into your Zendesk. If you go to my YouTube page, I've got a separate playlist for Zenflow. I've got a walkthrough of the actual Zenflow app. I show you how you can get Zendesk AI autocorrect, which is actually saving my agents so much time and making them work so much faster. And they love it. They don't have to work so hard to make their stuff sound really clear, or it really simplifies things for them. So it's super cool. Anyway, check Zenflow out. Okay, send the new ticket to Zendesk. So over here, it gets a little bit more technical, but you guys can do this. Don't worry about it. So what we're going to be doing is using a webhook, which is going to send information to Voiceflow. Think of a webhook kind of like an API call where you can like send and receive information, and it's directly within Zendesk. So Zendesk is going to send an API call, which is a webhook, directly into Voiceflow and send the ticket ID, because that's what we want to get, and receive it in this step here. So back in Zendesk, let's go to admin and let's type in webhooks. We've got a bunch here, right? But we're going to create a new one with you. And let's go, the webhook is essentially triggered off by a trigger that we set up in Zendesk. So it needs some event to say, all right, you have to now, shoot off your webhook. Let's click next. Let's call this Zendesk and dash Voiceflow, leave the description. So the endpoint that we're using is this endpoint here. Whoops, why isn't that working? Okay, so what is this endpoint? This is the API endpoint for Voiceflow. Let's just go into Voiceflow interact API, Voiceflow interact API. The endpoint is this general runtime.voiceflow.com state user ID and interact. User ID has to be a unique string, which is going to create a unique conversation. So back in Zendesk, that's what we've done here. We're using our ticket ID as a unique string, and we're using a Zendesk placeholders. If you've ever created a macro and you ever put like hi and then use the placeholder, which is double curly brackets for like first name, it automatically just inputs the customer's first name when the macro is applied to that ticket. That's what happens here as well. Since this trigger is going to fire off in that specific ticket, this will dynamically change to the value of that ticket ID itself. So in our case where we had this ticket was 80, this would have changed to, this would have been erased and basically just been 80 here. And yeah, this is the API endpoint to interact with Voiceflow. So now we're going to be using the post method. We're going to leave it as JSON, and we're going to authenticate with an API key. So the API key that we're going to be using is back in Voiceflow. Let's go to settings, to integration. Yeah, integration. Just copy this API key, go back to Zendesk, and API key, we're gonna put a value here, and for here, authorization. Now let's test this webhook. Let's go send test. Okay, so we got a 404 error. Why is that? Most likely because we didn't put a value here. Maybe this squirrely brackets are impacting this test. Let's go send test. Okay, so the test was okay, but the return that we have here is just an empty object. So what we're gonna be actually doing when we're sending this webhook is we're going to send a custom payload. So this is just a test payload that we have from Zendesk. So we're going to go to here, send custom test, and paste in this. So this is going to use a similar query language that Voiceflow already uses when you're interacting with Voiceflow API. So we're going to do action, it's going to be type intent, and we're going to send the payload, which is going to target the receive underscore event intent, which we're going to be building out in Voiceflow in just a second. And the query is going to contain the ticket ID. Again, it's going to be dynamic to the actual ticket. So just like it changes here, ticket ID, it's going to change here too. And that's where we get this ticket ID and we capture it in this first block here. So back here, let's just pretend that we're sending this as an actual request, and let's go send test. Okay, so type path payload capture end. Okay, so now we're actually interacting with the Voiceflow build that we have. So that sounds cool. That looks cool to me. I'm just going to go here and paste this in so it's dynamic. I'm going to go create webhook. Let's go finish setup and leave without connecting for now. Let's go to trigger. I've got some triggers set up as well, but let's make a new trigger together. And let's call this send webhook to Voiceflow. Category, I think we need to choose this, notifications. Okay, so let's go to ticket and is created. Every time a ticket is created, we send this off to Voiceflow. And the action that we want to do is send notify by active webhook. And what do we just make? We made this one, okay, because it has this dynamic endpoint here. And just like before, we're going to be pasting this in. While we're here, let's just set up this receive intent thing, right? Because we're going to be essentially targeting an intent in our Voiceflow project that has this specific name, receive intent. Okay, now let's add an intent into here. So, okay, it's called the trigger now. So let's plug this into here. And this trigger, let's set it up. It's going to be create intent. The name is going to be what we had over here, receive intent. And let's just make one of these utterances the exact same so we cover all bases. If it doesn't pick up the name, it's going to pick up the actual utterance. Let's go create intent. And now when we make this trigger that's going to trigger off this webhook, it's going to go specifically to this receive intent, which is this here. So again, we can have like 5 of these streams, all of different intents, and different tickets have different routes. This is exactly how you set that up. So we have this, it's going to feed into this block here. Now, what we have to consider is when we're sending this information, we're not just sending the ticket ID exposed like, ticket underscore ID and then whatever it is, XYZ. Because if we sent it like this, we could just access the ticket ID immediately in that capture step, right? Because it would just be capturing this ticket ID. Since we're kind of like hiding it in this, in these formalities, we have to capture this and process it through a JavaScript step that's going to pull out the ticket ID for us. So back on the canvas, we're just going to get rid of this for now. Let's delete this. Let's delete this. Let's make this go to JavaScript step, plug the JavaScript step into here. And now we're just going to write some basic JavaScript. So we're going to go variable ticket ID equals last utterance. Last utterance. So what we're doing with this is when we target that specific intent step, which is receive intent, we're sending this as the last utterance. We're just sending this into like the backend saying, yep, cool, save last utterance as whatever is contained within these talking marks here. So on the canvas, this receive intent step, at this point, that last utterance that we're accessing here, last utterance, at this point, that's already set as the ticket ID. Again, so the ticket ID is being sent in that step here. So we already have here at this stage, last utterance is the ticket ID. So over here, we're just saying, cool, well, we need the ticket ID to plug into our API call. Give us that ticket ID from the last utterance step. So over here, we actually should be able to now publish this flow to make it accessible and then, run it through our Zendesk. So I'm just gonna let this publish. Okay, I'm gonna run it once and everything should be initialized. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing here is just testing out this general query because we know that works. And just to show us at this stage, by the way, we've done everything. We already set up this webhook. We've set up the trigger that's gonna trigger off the webhook for any new ticket. And it's gonna send to Voiceflow. Actually, before we finish this, one last thing that I wanna do is add a tag to the ticket. And I'm gonna say stop flow. So just to as best practice, and we don't really need it for this specific condition here because once a ticket is created, it's never created again. So we don't need this specific step, but basically you put this stop flow as a condition that as long as the tags do not contains none of the following, stop flow, we can run this. So let's say we had some way that this could be a circular argument where every time a ticket is updated, we would trigger off this webhook where we would get like a constant update to the ticket, right? Because if we triggered this off every time a ticket is updated, then every time this API call sends an update to the Zendesk ticket, that's an update again, which will trigger off this condition, send the webhook to Voiceflow, update the ticket again, and then update the ticket again. So you have like a perpetual update on the ticket. So what you want to do here is have some way of like stepping out of that update, and you do that by adding a tag. So you add this tag that says stop flow, and this condition says, okay, every time the ticket runs through one of these conditions and it does not contain this, we're good. But if it does contain this, it means we've already sent it out and do not send it again. So let's just create this, and that's going to be active and it should work. I'm going to go to my Gmail and just see if we can test this out. Let's compose, go to support, and let's put the subject as, let's just make it super easy, general question. And let's say, hi guys, what time do you open? Thanks. It doesn't even matter. Thanks, Bart. Let's send this and let's go into Zendesk and just try and find that ticket and let's see when it comes in. General question. Thanks, Bart. And we have general question. So I've got a couple of different flow tags that were added here. Voiceflow responded via sent because I've got a bunch of triggers that are still open. So the stop flow is what we created as part of our trigger. Let's look at the ticket events as well. So tags general question added a minute ago, and this general question would have been added from our Voiceflow API call, which is this general question here. Okay, so that demos the entire project. All right, so that's the entire workflow. As you can see, we've only got a couple of blocks here. So it's not too complicated. Like if you want to start doing some kind of automation for your CRM, like Zendesk, Freshdesk, whatever you're using, it's super easy, especially with a tool like Voiceflow. Now, if you do want to go a little bit more complex, reach out to me. I do this for people all the time.